The hum of the fluorescent lights above me was the only sound filling the small, run-down convenience store as I wiped down the counter for what felt like the 100th time that night. My name is Violet, and I've been working the night shift here for about 3 months now. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. Rent's due next week, and I've been pushing myself through these late shifts, trying to scrape together enough to make ends meet. Honestly, I don't even mind the long hours most of the time. I'm used to the quiet. But tonight, something felt different. Maybe it was the constant buzz of the lights, or the way the shadows stretched longer than usual, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. Maybe I was just tired. Exhausted even. Sam had been working here for years, long before I came along, and I guess you could say he was kind of the store's old-timer. He'd warned me about the weird things that happen in the store. He always gave me these cryptic warnings in passing, like some kind of twisted tradition, but tonight he seemed a little more serious. "You know the stockroom, right?" Sam asked, his voice low, almost hesitant. He was the only other person working the night shift with me, but he spent most of his time in the back, counting inventory or dealing with whatever creepy things happened back there. "Yeah, the stockroom," I said, rubbing my eyes. I hadn't had a proper night's sleep in days. Sam paused, his gaze flicking nervously to the back of the store. He shifted uneasily from foot to foot. "Stay away from the trapdoor in the stockroom. If it starts creaking, don't go near it. I've seen things. Things that aren't right." He gave me a half-hearted chuckle, but I could see the fear in his eyes. Something about it made me uncomfortable. He looked like he was trying to shake off a memory that wasn't entirely his own. I rolled my eyes, mostly out of habit. "Isn't that a little dramatic? It's just a trapdoor, Sam. What's the worst that could happen?" I wasn't worried. I'd been here long enough to know the quirks of the place. Creaky floors, flickering lights, the occasional strange noise that couldn't be explained. But Sam? He always had this edge to him, like he knew something I didn't. Still, I wasn't about to let some silly story get to me. "Yeah, well, it's your funeral," Sam muttered as he disappeared into the back. The rest of the shift passed slowly. The store was quiet, as usual. It wasn't until I heard it that things started to feel off. At first, it was just a faint scraping sound, like something heavy was being dragged across the floor in the stockroom. I froze, wiping my hands on my apron. It couldn't be Sam. He was in the back, dealing with some deliveries. But the sound persisted, a slow, methodical scrape, scrape, scrape. It sent a shiver down my spine. I made my way toward the stockroom, determined to check it out, thinking maybe a box had fallen over or something. As I opened the door, the scraping stopped, and everything felt eerily quiet. I stepped inside, flicking the light on, and scanned the room. Nothing out of the ordinary. The shelves were neatly organized. The floor was clear. The trapdoor in the corner, however, caught my attention. It was small, covered in dust, and had a faint creak to it if you stepped too close. I shook my head. Must be the wind, I thought. The ventilation system in this place was practically ancient. I'd probably just imagined the sound. As I turned to leave, I noticed the clock on the wall. It was almost 2 a.m. Time had been dragging for hours. The store felt like it was stuck in some weird, never-ending loop of repetition. I could barely remember what I'd done 20 minutes ago. The same routine, the same flickering lights, the same quiet, empty store. But then, there it was again. Scrape, scrape, scrape. This time I didn't hesitate. My feet moved almost on their own, taking me toward the trapdoor. I stopped just short of it, wondering why I hadn't noticed it before. It was so old, it was practically part of the floor, and yet something about it felt off. The air in the stockroom seemed heavier here, thicker. I bent down to examine it closer, but the sound stopped again. I waited for a moment, heart pounding in my chest, feeling that familiar sense of unease wash over me. I'd heard about things like this before, whispers about old, haunted places and how they could make your mind play tricks on you. But this was different. I'd never felt this kind of pull before. For a brief second, I thought about Sam's warning. Maybe he wasn't just messing around. Maybe there was something more to it than just an old trapdoor. But how could a place like this have anything to hide? I stood there, staring at it, wondering what could possibly be beneath. What could be hidden down there in that dark, quiet space that had always been sealed away? It was only then that I realized I was too curious for my own good. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It was like the store was pressing in on me, suffocating me with its silence. The clock ticked louder than usual, and the dim fluorescent lights flickered on and off every few seconds, creating an almost hypnotic effect. I tried to focus on the task at hand, restocking the shelves, cleaning up the spilled bags of chips, the usual. But my mind kept drifting back to the stockroom, to that trap door. It was close to midnight when I first heard it again. The creak. It was soft at first, barely audible over the hum of the lights. I thought maybe I was just imagining things, but then it came again, louder this time. Creak. A slow, deliberate sound, like something heavy was trying to push its way out from beneath. I froze in my tracks, my heart racing for reasons I couldn't explain. I glanced toward the stockroom, the trapdoor. It couldn't be. I thought, shaking my head as if I could dispel the thought with a simple gesture. But then it creaked again, and I felt a chill sweep down my spine. This wasn't some weird mechanical issue. No, this felt different. Unnatural, almost like the trapdoor was alive. Get a grip, I told myself. I rubbed my face, trying to shake the rising panic. It's nothing, just your mind playing tricks. Still, I couldn't ignore it. The creaking continued, like the door was slowly, agonizingly forcing itself open. I could almost hear something behind it, a rustling sound, like someone or something was moving in the darkness below. My eyes flickered to the back room, where Sam had disappeared earlier. He wasn't around now, and I couldn't help but feel the weight of his warning hanging over me. Stay away from the trapdoor. I swallowed hard, staring at the stockroom door. The air felt thick, heavy, like I was standing on the edge of something much larger than this store, like the very ground beneath me was shifting. But curiosity gnawed at me. Despite everything in my body screaming to stay away, I took a step toward the back. The creaking grew louder, more insistent, like a whisper calling my name. Violet, I hesitated. My feet were planted to the floor, but my eyes were fixed on the trapdoor. Something was happening in that basement. Something that was beyond my control. The lights above flickered again, more erratically this time, and I caught sight of something strange. The shelves in the aisles. They were moving. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but I could see it now. One shelf was tilting ever so slightly to the left, and another shelf near the back shifted just enough to cause the bags of chips to spill. I blinked hard, shaking my head as if to clear away the fog. My heart pounded in my chest. I couldn't tell if I was seeing things or if something was really happening. I turned my back on the aisle for just a moment, and when I looked back, the shelf had shifted even more. The bags scattered across the floor. It was as if the entire store was breathing. A soft, cold gust of wind swept through the store, despite the doors being shut and locked. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I didn't know what was going on, but it was too much to ignore. Too many strange things had happened in too short a time. The store was not right, and it felt like it was shifting around me, alive in some way I couldn't understand. I need to check it out, I told myself. I don't know why I thought this would solve anything, but I needed to. I had to know what was making that noise, what was behind the door. I made my way to the stockroom door. The trapdoor was partially open now, the edges of the wood warped, as though it had been forced open from below. The smell that hit me as I stepped closer was unbearable, stale, musty, and almost rotten. It was the kind of smell that made your stomach churn, like decay was wafting up from beneath. I stood frozen for a moment, staring at it. I could feel the pull, a magnetic force that seemed to be drawing me closer to the trapdoor. It wasn't natural. It wasn't right. But the more I stared at it, the more I felt like I had no choice. I had to go down. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting Sam to burst out from the back and stop me. But the store was empty, the shelves now oddly still. I grabbed the flashlight from the counter and stepped toward the trapdoor. It creaked one last time, a low groan that seemed to echo in the back of my skull. With a trembling hand, I pushed it open all the way. The dark space below yawned at me, an abyss that I couldn't look away from. I felt my breath catch in my throat. A cold wind gusted from the opening, sending a shiver down my spine. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that this was just another thing to add to the long list of strange occurrences that seemed to happen in this place. But I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was waiting below, watching me. I took a deep breath, holding the flashlight tightly, and climbed down the wooden stairs that led into the basement. Each step felt like it was pulling me deeper into something I didn't understand. The flashlight flickered in my hand, the beam cutting through the darkness, but I couldn't see anything beyond the few feet in front of me. The basement was pitch black, colder than anything I'd ever felt. A strange sensation crept over me, like my instincts were screaming for me to turn back. But it was too late now. I was already halfway down, the darkness swallowing me whole. I reached the bottom, and the air was thick, damp and heavy, and filled with an unsettling chill. My flashlight sputtered out, plunging me into an even deeper darkness. I felt my heartbeat in my throat, louder now, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every part of me screamed to leave, but my feet wouldn't move. There was something down here, something that I had to see, even if I didn't want to. My breath fogged in the air as I stood in the pitch-black room, the darkness pressing in on all sides. I could feel the walls around me, but I couldn't see them. There was nothing but the oppressive silence and the cold. And that's when I heard it. A soft whisper, almost too faint to hear. The basement was darker than I could have ever imagined. Like the walls themselves were absorbing the light, suffocating it until there was nothing left but pure black. My flashlight flickered again, and I could feel the air around me thickening with each step I took further into the abyss. It wasn't just the darkness that pressed in on me, though. No, it was the feeling that something was watching, waiting. The silence was deafening, but it wasn't empty. It felt alive. Every inch of me screamed to turn back, but I couldn't. The pull was too strong. I couldn't explain it, but there was something here. Something ancient. Something that belonged to the darkness itself. The further I descended into the basement, the more the air seemed to wrap itself around me like a cold, suffocating blanket. I stumbled forward, the flashlight shaking in my hand as I fought to see through the thick fog of darkness. The walls were closing in, the space feeling smaller with each step, but I was moving forward, as if something inside me had already decided that I would see this through. And then, I saw it. At the far end of the basement, through the black, swirling shadows, there was a light. A pulsating glow, faint at first but growing stronger the closer I got. My heart skipped a beat. I couldn't tell what it was. It didn't make any sense. The air grew colder as I neared it, a chill creeping into my bones, making my teeth chatter. I stepped forward, drawn in like a moth to a flame, but this wasn't any ordinary light. The closer I got, the more the glow twisted and changed, flickering like flames dancing in the wind. And then I realized, this wasn't just a light. It was a portal. A swirling, ominous thing that seemed to pulse with an unnatural life of its own. I stopped just a few feet away from it, my eyes wide in disbelief. It was like I was staring at a rift in reality itself, a tear in the fabric of the world that shouldn't be there. The glow shimmered and twisted, the colors shifting in impossible ways. Red, black, orange. It was as if the very essence of the place was being bent, contorted, into something that shouldn't exist. And then I heard it. Screams. Distant, muffled cries, echoing from within the portal. The kind of screams that chilled your bones, like the souls of the damned were being tortured in a place that had no end. I felt my breath catch in my throat. What the hell was this? I should have turned back. I should have run up the stairs and slammed the trapdoor shut, but I couldn't move. It was like the portal had a hold of me, its presence tugging at me, urging me closer. My feet dragged me forward, against my better judgment. That's when the flashlight sputtered out completely, plunging me into an impenetrable darkness. The only sound now was the faint hum of the portal, and the screams from far beyond. I froze. My heart was pounding in my chest, every nerve screaming for me to leave, but I couldn't. Something was wrong. Something was here. Welcome back. The voice came from behind me, soft and intimate, like it had been whispering in my ear for years. I spun around, flashlight useless in my hand, and in the dark I saw nothing. No shadow, no shape. Just the oppressive weight of the air pressing down on me, suffocating me. I stumbled backward, the words echoing in my mind. I wasn't alone, welcome back. It felt like a punch to the gut. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. My pulse was deafening in my ears as my mind raced to understand what was happening. That voice, it knew me, but I didn't know it. I wanted to run, to get out. but my legs wouldn't cooperate. The portal. It called to me. The space around it seemed to warp, as if time itself bent beneath its weight. I could feel it tugging at me, its pull undeniable. The air was thick with a presence, a pressure building behind my eyes, and despite every rational part of me telling me to stay away, every fiber of my being pulled toward it. I took another step forward, as if I were being drawn into the very bowels of the earth. My breath was shallow, my stomach twisting with dread. This wasn't just some dark basement, it wasn't even a trapdoor to nowhere. No, this was a gateway, a portal to something else. I could feel my pulse in my throat, beating harder, faster with every inch I closed between myself and the glowing rift. I stood on the edge of it now, the faint light illuminating my face in sickly shades of red and orange. It didn't feel like light anymore. It felt wrong, like the shadows themselves had taken on a physical form. My fingers brushed against it, and in that instant everything changed. The world around me seemed to fall away as my senses were overloaded. The air went cold, the temperature dropping to levels I couldn't explain. And then the visions hit me. Flashes, like snapshots from a nightmare. Hell flames. The crackling of fire as it consumed everything in its path. Screams, thousands of them, echoing in agony as twisted, contorted bodies writhed in eternal torment. Blood spilled in rivers, dark and sticky, pooling beneath charred, broken souls. The ground cracked open, jagged and unforgiving, and towering figures loomed over it all, creatures of nightmare, their eyes burning with malice. I gasped, stumbling back as the images flashed faster, too fast for me to comprehend. A deep, gnawing emptiness pulled at me, like I was falling into the very core of this terrible place. For a moment I felt as though I was being sucked into the portal, as though I had lost all control. But then, just as quickly as it began, it stopped. I was still standing there, just inches away from the pulsing rift. My hand hovered above it, trembling. My heart was hammering in my chest, and I could barely breathe. The whispers still echoed in my mind, and I could feel it. It wanted me. It wasn't just a portal, it was a doorway to hell itself. And somehow I was supposed to be here. I couldn't breathe. The weight of everything around me felt like it was pressing down, suffocating me. My chest was tight, each inhale shallow and strained. The portal before me flickered like a dying flame, casting grotesque shadows that danced on the walls. It was all too much to process. I had seen hell, I had touched it, and yet, I still couldn't make sense of it. But then I heard something that made my blood run cold. A voice. Soft at first, like a whisper carried on the wind. Violet. I froze. It wasn't the same voice I'd heard before. No, this was different. It was my voice. But wrong. It didn't sound like me. It sounded twisted, as though it was being torn apart by the very darkness that surrounded me. I took a hesitant step back, but I couldn't tear my gaze away from the portal. And then it happened. Out of the swirling blackness, a figure emerged. At first, I thought it was just another hallucination, another nightmare creeping into the periphery of my mind. But no, this thing stepped fully into the basement, its body sliding out of the rift like it belonged there. I couldn't move. I was frozen in place as I watched her emerge. It was me. But not. Her skin was pale, almost sickly white, with cracks that ran along her face like veins beneath fragile porcelain. Her eyes were empty, black holes of nothingness, sucking in the light around her. Her smile was twisted, wide, stretching far too much for any human face. It was the kind of smile you see in your nightmares, the kind that fills you with a primal terror you can't escape. She was me. But she wasn't. Violet. Her voice was thick with malice, but it had that familiar cadence, the same tone I would use when I said my name aloud. But hers was a hiss, laced with hunger. You've come home. I took a step back, my heart hammering in my chest. I wanted to scream, to run, to claw my way up the stairs and lock the trapdoor behind me. But my legs wouldn't move. I couldn't tear my eyes away from her. This thing, this demon, was me. You're not real, I whispered, my voice trembling. My brain struggled to make sense of it all. You can't be me. Her smile widened, revealing teeth too sharp for a human mouth. I am you, Violet. The real you. You've been living in the world of the living, unaware of the truth, but you'll understand soon enough. You always were meant for this. I shook my head, trying to steady myself. This couldn't be happening. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. You, she continued, her voice dripping with disdain, are nothing but a copy. A fleeting thing in the world above, living out your days without ever realizing that you belong here, with me. In hell. I've been trapped here for eternity, but you're the one who will replace me. My breath caught in my throat, the words crashing into me like a wave. No, I won't. I couldn't even finish the sentence. The weight of what she was saying suffocated me. She stepped closer, her eyes locking onto mine. The air grew even colder, her presence suffocating, invasive. The store you see, the place you've been working in, it's just a temporary holding place, a prison for those souls who haven't yet fulfilled their purpose. She chuckled, and the sound was like nails scraping against a chalkboard. This store has seen many like you, people who were pulled in, lured by the promise of a normal life, but you're just another pawn in the cycle. I stumbled back, shaking my head in disbelief. No, this is just a nightmare. It can't be true. Her laughter was low, cruel. You don't understand yet, do you? You're about to become a part of the cycle. The portal's always been here. It just lies dormant, waiting for the next soul to fill its place. But it's only temporary. Once the next soul arrives, the cycle begins again. Her voice dropped to a whisper. And you will never leave. You will become just like me, trapped in this hellish place for eternity. I could feel my heart race, my chest tightening with panic. The room around me seemed to warp, to stretch and twist like it was being pulled in on itself. The walls, the shelves, the floor, they all seemed to flicker, unstable, like an old film reel skipping frames. My mind reeled. Was this real? Or was I already in hell? Was I already dead? Was this store, this place, just a facade, a temporary holding place for souls like mine to live out their last moments? The air was thick with dread, and I felt my sanity slipping. I couldn't tell what was real anymore, the store, the portal, even this version of myself. It all felt like a dream. Or maybe a nightmare, but deep down I knew. I was already too far gone. I staggered backward, nearly tripping over the trapdoor, my mind screaming for me to run, to escape. But there was no way out. Not now. The pull of the portal was too strong, and I felt myself drawn toward it, like a moth to a flame. The demon version of myself stepped closer, her smile widening in delight. You're almost there, Violet. You're so close. Her voice was like ice in my veins. The store will be waiting, and when the time comes, you'll fall just like I did. I could feel it then, something cold wrapping around my chest, tightening like an iron chain. It was real. This was real. I wasn't in control anymore. I was slipping into the same fate as my twisted double. I had come to the brink of the abyss, and now there was no way back. The world around me felt like it was dissolving, the boundaries between reality and something much darker fading into one unrecognizable blur. The store, the place I had once seen as just another pit stop on my miserable path, no longer felt like a simple building. The shelves bent, the lights flickered erratically, and the air was thick with a palpable darkness, a suffocating presence that pressed down on me from every corner. I was trapped, and I knew it. I could feel the suffocating grip of inevitability as it wrapped itself around my chest, my throat, and my heart. There was no escape now. My demon self stood before me, her eyes gleaming with something that wasn't pity. It was something much worse. Triumph. She knew what I was about to realize, and that realization tore through me like a jagged blade. You're finally starting to understand, aren't you? She purred, her voice sweet, like sugar on a tongue. You always knew. Every choice, every turn you've made led you here. The guilt, the regret, the darkness that's always been inside of you. It was never going to be any different. I could feel the weight of her words, pulling me under. Her voice whispered to the deepest parts of me, dredging up memories I had long buried. Things I had done, things I had wanted to do. She was right. Every mistake, every dark thought I ever had been a seed planted, and now it was bearing fruit. It had always been leading me to this moment. I saw flashes, fragments of my life, my actions, things I'd tried to forget. I saw the faces of people I had hurt, the selfish decisions, the lies, the little betrayals that I had convinced myself weren't a big deal. But it was all too clear now. Each tiny wrong choice had been a step down a path with no way back. A path that had always led straight to this hellish place. Do you see it now? The demon whispered, her voice low and filled with satisfaction. Every time you thought you were better than this, you were already mine. Your fate was sealed long before you ever stepped foot in that store. Tears stung my eyes, but I forced them back. No, I couldn't let her do this. I couldn't let her win. I shook my head fiercely, trying to push the visions away, trying to snap myself out of this hellish reverie. I'm not like you, I said, my voice shaking but determined. I'm not you. Her laugh was sharp, like the crack of a whip. You think you can escape me? She mocked, stepping closer. The air grew colder, and the walls of the store seemed to shrink around me, pressing in from every side, suffocating the space until there was nothing left but me and her. You've always been me. You just couldn't admit it until now. The portal behind her pulsed, its glow intensifying, threatening to suck me in with every second. The more I resisted, the stronger her presence became. I felt my strength draining, my will faltering. She was right. She was me, and I was her. There was no escaping that. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I couldn't let it end like this. I couldn't. Leave me alone, I shouted, my hands trembling as I reached out to push the portal away, as if I could somehow close it, stop it from pulling me in. But the demon smirked. You can't close it, Violet. You've already opened it. You've already stepped through it. The only way out now is in. This is your place. You can fight me all you want, but deep down you already know you belong here. This store? This is just a waiting room. And now it's your turn to join me. I fought harder, every instinct telling me to flee. I grabbed at the shelves, desperate to hold on to something that felt real. But everything was warping around me. The floor buckled beneath my feet, and the lights flashed, casting long, grotesque shadows that seemed to move with a mind of their own. The portal was closer now, its pull stronger, more insistent. My hands were shaking, my heart pounded in my chest, I felt my soul splitting. Half of me wanted to resist, wanted to run, but the other half knew that this had always been my fate. I had already made my choice, long before I even understood it. And now, there was no going back. The demon's face twisted into a mocking smile. I am you, Violet, and you're finally going to accept that. No, I screamed, fighting to keep control. I'm not you, I'm me. I'm different, I can change. But the words sounded hollow. Even I didn't believe them anymore. The demon's grin widened. You've always been like me, you just didn't want to face it. You can't change what's already been written in the dark corners of your soul. I sank to my knees, feeling the weight of everything, of the truth, of the inevitability, crushing me. My breath came in shallow gasps. I was losing. I am you, she repeated, her voice a whisper now, curling around me like a suffocating fog. And you are me. Her words burrowed into my mind like parasites, and I finally understood. It wasn't about the store or the portal. It wasn't even about the demon in front of me. It was about me. I had always belonged here. The darkness was inside me long before I ever stepped into the basement. The portal had been waiting. I had been waiting. And as I stared into her eyes, I finally accepted it. I didn't have a choice. This place was my prison. I had already crossed the line. The walls closed in, the portal pulsed with a final, violent force, and everything around me disintegrated into the eternal darkness of hell. The truth hit me like a ton of bricks, and for a moment, I couldn't even process it. My demon self, standing in front of me with that sickening smile stretched wide across her face, didn't speak. She didn't need to. I felt it. The realization, dawning like a slow, suffocating tide, filling me from the inside out. The store around me warped even further, the walls closing in. But it wasn't just the space. It was my mind, the boundaries between the real world and this place blurring until I couldn't distinguish one from the other. Every sound, every shadow felt like a part of me, familiar, yet wrong. I don't understand, I whispered, my voice trembling with the last vestiges of defiance. What is this? What's happening? Her smile curled upward. She didn't have to answer. The answer was already inside me. I stumbled backward, my eyes wide, my breath ragged. The store felt wrong. It had always felt wrong, but now the truth sank in, and I couldn't escape it. The basement, the portal, the warning from Sam, it was all part of something much bigger than me. The store was never just a building, it was a prison. And I was the one who had built it. You've always been here, she said softly, her voice like a caress in the cold, suffocating air. The night shift, the endless hours, the trapdoor in the stockroom, it was all for you, for us. I shook my head. No, that's not possible. I'm human. I was just working my shift. I was just trying to make rent. She laughed, a cruel, hollow sound that echoed in the twisted space. You never were human, Violet. You were just a shell, a vessel. You're not the one who's been alive in this place. You've been calling me. You've always been calling me here. I stumbled backward, my legs giving way beneath me as the floor seemed to tilt. My heart raced and my mind spiraled into chaos. No, this couldn't be true. Could it? The store, the basement, the trapdoor, it's all part of the trap, the cycle. The portal is a conduit, a way to bring the real you into this world, the you that was always meant to exist. She stepped closer, and my breath hitched. The real Violet was never the one who worked here. It was always me. You. I was the one who was trapped in the dark, and now, you've come to join me. My pulse thundered in my ears as the weight of her words sunk in. I had been wrong all along. The demon, the twisted version of myself, it wasn't a separate being. It was me. It was always me. The real Violet, the one who had been working those night shifts, stacking shelves, running the cash register, wasn't alive. I wasn't alive. I had been living in a lie, in a shell, believing that I was just a regular person trying to make it through the nights. But the truth was much darker. I wasn't the victim. I was the predator. I had always been the demon. The human form I inhabited was just a temporary mask, an illusion that had been wearing thin all along. The body I had been living in, the body I thought was me, it was nothing but an empty vessel, created to serve a purpose. A vessel to bring the demon into the world. And now I had come home. I staggered toward the portal, the realization closing in on me like a vice. I wanted to scream, to run, to tear myself away from this fate. But it was too late. There was no running. There was no escape. I had been calling this moment into existence since the very beginning. The demon's voice echoed through my mind, her words seeping into my bones. You've already accepted it. This is who you are. This is your home now. This is your purpose. I didn't resist anymore. I couldn't. I could feel the human part of me fading, slipping away, like sand running through my fingers. The warmth, the remnants of humanity, all of it melted away as my true form began to emerge. The store around me flickered one last time, the walls bending and twisting as if they couldn't contain me anymore. The portal glowed brighter, the light flickering and dimming, its power reaching out to pull me in. But I didn't go. I didn't need to. I was already here. I was already one with the darkness. The human body I had inhabited for so long began to fade, the edges of my vision blurring as it crumbled away, leaving nothing but the demon, the real me, the one who had always existed. The one who had always been waiting. And then it was over. The portal snapped shut, and the store fell silent. I stood alone in the middle of the abandoned convenience store. The night shift was over, the shelves empty, the cash register silent. The world outside had disappeared. All that remained was me, the real me. My human form, Violet, was gone, but the demon, I was still here. Wandering through the empty store, forever trapped in the same cycle, a never-ending loop of torment and darkness. There was no one left to witness it, no one left to save. The trap had claimed me, and now, I was the one who waited for the next soul to step into my world.